Hi, I'm Josh, and I'm an architecture student based in New York. And this is Common Studio. Hello guys, this is Josh from Common Studio, and welcome back to another video of showing off my semester projects from my studio class of architecture school. This semester was two projects. Project number 1 was bridging surfaces, and project number 2, urban sanctuary. So let's jump right into it. The idea of connection is one that can be discussed in terms of singularity and duality. On one hand, a connection is a unifier joining two objects into a new object. On the other hand, the connection can also act as an insulator between two previously unrelated objects, not joined but different. The connector can now become a threshold between two previously disconnected elements, acting as a new hybrid element. This project will challenge the student to develop a design for a bridge connecting two structures, taking into account the nature of connecting or spanning between two surfaces, materials, properties, and structure. The relationship between the buildings can be connected, the surrounding urban fabric, and the experience of the body moving through space. For our first assignment, we did a site visit in which we went to look around and just take pictures. This location specifically is over at the Etsy building in Brooklyn. So it's right in between the Brooklyn Bridge and the Manhattan Bridge that can be seen from both sides. So this was a collage that we had to make using the images that we took from the site visit, which was only like a few minutes walk distance from our class. And then from this collage, we had to create three separate diagrams, one being a linear diagram, planar diagram, and a spatial diagram. All three analyzing the work that we did within the collage and try to analyze the forms that were created with the different images. To go into further detail, for the linear diagram, I interpreted all the linear lines as my collage was more of an aerial view that showed a 360 side of both sides of the street as well as what's on the other ends of the streets. So I did a linear lines of the guiding lines of the buildings and as well as the lines that connect to the bridges as well. Then the planar diagram was a outline of the different collages and images of the buildings that I took. Each of the buildings had different businesses that were different sizes. And then a spatial diagram was I had a bit of an issue creating that one, so it's very similar to the previous one, but is more oblong and abstract. Next up for our third assignment was study models. We had to create a model for each of those three previous diagrams that we had to do, which was the linear diagram, the planar diagram, and then the spatial diagram. I did have to do two separate spatial diagrams because I decided to develop further the idea that I initially had, which was this third one on the left. So the linear diagram I did using some wooden sticks and some pieces of spaghetti because I wanted to show the hierarchy of the different thicknesses of the sticks, and I didn't have anything that was thinner than the spaghetti. Then the planar diagram was kind of cutting up the papers into the different spaces that are created in the planar diagram while also keeping it completely connected through the paths that were created through the street as well as the bridges on the ends, which are represented by the throughway and the loops. And then the third one that I did was leaning more towards becoming a bridge. And then I had this idea because I had done the loops on the second spatial study model. I decided to further develop those loops and integrate that into the study model design. I initially thought that it would be a good idea to have the loops all connect to one point, but then I changed my mind and I had them separate loops being different sizes connecting continuously, and that's something that I stayed with throughout my model. Going from there, we had to transform our study model into Rhino in a 3D digital space. So we spent a few classes doing this because most students were still new to Rhino. We have the roof plan, the floor plan, and the section. When we were creating these spaces, we also had to think about what these spaces were going to be used as and create kind of a program, but not a formal program for what we wanted the spaces to be used as. So it has a linear path that people crossing from building to building can go through, or there's also places on the sides that people can stay and enjoy their time on the bridge rather than just using it as a threshold. Then here we have my elevations and the sections. All three look very similar as it is a very symmetrical design. But in the section, you can see the way that this bridge would be used to be walked through, and there's also ramps that go up to the second level. It would be a second level that's mostly full of planters and a garden, as it would be a better view of the street looking out to the bridges. And then finally was my presentation model. For my presentation model is, I'm not sure what this material is. I believe it some kind of hard cardboard material, but it was white. So I cut a bunch of strips and I cut a bunch of little strips and then dashed them so that they're able to curve in a circle to create the loops that surrounded the bridge. And then the core of the bridge itself is 3D printed, which took me a couple tries to do because it was my first time using a 3D printer, and I had to use the 3D printer at school at the time. And if it were to fail, I would have to wait until the next day I was in school to be able to restart again. Here you can see this is on the second level. You can see the passway as well as the openings for the ramps to go down, or the stairs that would be existing inside this bridge. And you can see it's mostly open space on the second floor. As I said before, it would be mostly a green space for the views. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this first project of my second semester. I learned quite a lot, especially developing my skills with Rhino, as I had a lot of difficulties making these loops be uniform in size and shape. I had to put a lot into the way these spaces were formed as a standalone piece, being a bridge, but also a usable space that is able to be occupied. In this project, students will be introduced to strategies for documenting and analyzing site conditions with the intention of using this information to develop a site-specific design proposal. The site and its context can often be in the genesis of inspiration, discovery, and contradiction, and unexpected unearthing of histories. Students will be expected to thoughtfully develop a design language that achieves meaningful connection to the site while interweaving given programmatic, historical, and environmental parameters. Students will continue exploring design and tectonic elements of the line, plane, and volume through site documentation analysis, drafted through drawings, collages, and iterative model making. The goal is to amplify systematic thinking and strategies for developing a cohesive design language while constructing programmed habitable spaces. This project consists of in-depth analysis of site topography and ecosystems with a goal of thoughtfully inserting and designing the following programmatic. So, to sum it up, what this summary did not discuss about is that this project was a house for a park ranger that is in Central Park. So this was our site in the Ramble in Central Park, and several students had to pick where our site was, and I was stuck being within site B, which was mostly a flat area, which was a bit more difficult to create interesting ideas. From our site visit, I was able to do a 3D scan from walking around, and I did a little site analysis of where I wanted my building to be based on where the water was and where the existing pathways were for the pedestrians that walk through Central Park. From there, we had to start creating some different topographies and manipulating the landscape. At some degree, every student had to manipulate the landscape. So my initial idea is that I wanted to berm the building into the ground. So the building is partially underground and then the rest is above ground. So these three on the right were just playing around in Rhino using the different tools and skills that I was learning throughout the class and watching tutorials. And then on the left side, we also had to do some study models of different ideas for the house that we wanted to create. And something that was told to us is that the simpler, the better. Our professor didn't want us to make anything that was too complicated for us. So I tried to keep it to simple forms of just two integrated pieces that were crossing each other. And I decided to go with the center one, which was my favorite. I did a Bristol model initially of the paper, and that was developed with a balcony, to have a balcony on the second floor, and as well as I did a 3D print of my landscape that I had manipulated. Then this is a solid mass of my building, which showed that the building was a little bit further in the ground, and then it had a ramp or staircase that was later integrated onto a public access space. As we continued to develop our drawings, we had to do a final set of drawings. So starting off with the site plan, this shows the manipulation of the land that I created, mostly in this 50 by 50 foot area with the existing pathways within the park. Here the existing pathway connects to the public area of the building, and you can see another pathway over on the back side that connects to the underground entrance for the park rangers' living quarters. That can be more easily seen on this first floor plan, where the entrance is in the rear. We were given specific sizing for our living quarters that had to include a kitchen, living room, sleeping area, bathroom, as well as storage space. So I managed to fit that all within a small space. In this first floor drawing, you can also see as well that there is a staircase within the bedroom that leads up into the second floor office space, which can be seen on the second floor. You have the staircase that goes up into the office, and they can be accessed to the public balcony. You have my building elevations. Here is when we started having to think about the facade and the materiality of the building and try to develop this. I had initially thought of having circular windows. You have another set of elevations showing the topography that covers most of the first floor underground. And then here are the sections. You can see the bathroom has sufficient space to be able to sit down on the toilet and still be able to use everything that's needed. And then you can see the kitchen on the right side, as well as the balcony over on the top. There's a section perspective. This is one of my favorite drawings that I've done so far. The section perspectives are one of the most beautiful drawings, in my personal opinion, that you can make as a student. Shows the cut lines. You can see most of everything of the entrance. You have the living room, the bedroom, the staircase that goes up to the office, even the balcony space for the public, as well even the openings for the windows. In this exploded asymmetric, you can see how the spaces connect to each other and within the context of the site. And then here are some renders that I created from the exterior, the 2 exterior shots, and then 2 interior. This one is one of the best ones that I have, because it shows the light, the way the light falls through the balcony space. And then here on the right side is the staircase that's inside the bedroom. So to top it off, was my final model for presentation was 3D printed, and it was done in several pieces that it was able to stick within my site model that I printed as well. Here in this image, you can see more in detail of the entrance for the park rangers' sleeping quarters. So that was the end of my second semester in architecture school. Let me know what you guys think of my projects in the comments, or what you guys would have done yourself, or what you guys did do in your second year. Stay creative and have a good day.